الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد، فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. صدق الله العظيم العظيم. My dear respected and most honorable Qibla Imam Sahib, my respected and most honorable elders, beloved brothers and sisters who made this ring of Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi.
Wow, mashallah, that was very comprehensive and undeserving welcome or introduction, shall we say. And sometimes, you know, when somebody introduces you like that, you don't want to say that was undeserving for me, even though you feel it. Because sometimes your humbleness may be taken as a form of pride. Sometimes people say, oh, well, yes, you know, thank you very much. You know, I'm undeserving of this. Sometimes people be humble as a form of pride, and seen as a form of pride. It's like, you know, when people would write, in my humble opinion, you know, I disagree with you, you know, I will contradict you, in my humble opinion, this is what I believe. But your opinion is not humble. In Islam, there's no such thing as fiya'i and mutawadi. In my humble opinion, this is what I think. No. You know, according to the scholars, an individual who believes that he is humble. If you think that you're humble, and you have a sense of humility within you, that in itself is a form of pride. Believing that you're humble is a form of pride. May Allah protect us from each and every form of pride in myself and you. Alhamdulillah, this talk was actually scheduled for a couple of months ago. I was supposed to come and give this very same talk. Although it kind of doesn't fit in with the season that we have going around us. It's the night of Mi'raj is coming upon us, and usually the talks are centered around Al-Isra and Mi'raj, the night journey, heavenly journey of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, this talk, I'm going to try to include some aspects of that within this, or to incorporate some of that within this talk today, although it's slightly difficult. And the reason why,
Inshallah, after Maghrib we'll talk about Islam.
Inshallah, we'll see. You know, the reason why I wanted to talk about this topic is because I stayed here for the brothers here and for our elders who know me for 2.5 months in Southampton as the Imam of Bashir Ahmed Masjid. And mashallah, I'm seeing some regular faces from my weekly khutbahs there. Unfortunately, I was unable to come here due to time constraints and deliver any talks. I would have loved to do so. And I did schedule one talk for one of the weekends. I said, inshallah, for one weekend I'm going to come back. But on the way here, I had a little mishap, an accident, and unfortunately I was unable to make it for that talk. So first of all, I apologize for that. The talk is titled Tawheed and Shirk, understanding Tawheed and Shirk. And this is important. You know, it's not one of your brash, flash topics. You know, what would be a flash topic? Love for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Sahaba Al-Karam, and stories, Khalid bin Walid, the life of Khalid bin Walid, the life of Umar bin Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhuma. May Allah be pleased with all of them. You know, these are topics that rile up our emotions. You know, if we talk about the love that we should have for the Prophet ﷺ, or the respect for the Prophet ﷺ, although just merely talking about it increases your love for the Messenger of Allah ﷺ. But you know, that's not the purpose of this talk today. The reason being that this talk is going to be far different. This is one of those talks that you're going to listen to and it might go in one ear and out the other. It's not like those flashy topics. And I'll try to make it as entertaining as I possibly can. I'll try not to let you go to sleep. So that's my job, to keep you awake. And if I see somebody sleeping, then I'll give you the odd, clap or the smack of the fist on the table, as our teachers would do sometimes. When I was studying in Al-Karam as our teacher, and if we were, we were messing around at night and we didn't get to sleep on time, and we came to class late, and while we were in class in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, we were going to sleep, and suddenly he would let it go into an eerie silence. He would go quiet, and he would watch us for a few minutes, and he would not let anybody say a word, because everybody else would be looking and thinking, oh no, this guy's going to get it now. And then suddenly he would just go bang on the table, and that would give us that jolt. And he would say, I need to shock you to wake you up. And that shock factor. When you're asleep and you keep putting it on snooze, the alarm clock or your phone, and you keep putting it on snooze and snooze because you're so tired and your eyes are half closed. And then suddenly you pick up your phone and you realize it's 9:30 and you need to be at school at 9 o'clock. And that jolt, that adrenaline rush that you get, oh damn, what have I done? I need to get up, and you quickly get up. It gives you that energy. Then suddenly you're not tired anymore because you're worrying about being there. So inshallah, I'll try to do that today. Give you that jolt that will keep you somewhat entertained. The ulama have mentioned that there's a qaida, there's a principle, that with the opposites, things are known. How do we know that something is cold? If we had never experienced heat, we would never know what cold is. And likewise, vice versa, if we had never experienced what cold is, we wouldn't know what heat is. With opposites, things are known. In the same way, for us to understand the concept of shirk, we have to understand Tawheed. So before we fly around these claims and, like a AK-47 machine gun, letting the bullets of shirk come out at people, we have to understand what Tawheed is. And that's of paramount importance. What is Tawheed? That's the first thing. Because Tawheed, our entire Islam is based upon that one aspect of La ilaha illallah. There is no God but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm bearing witness in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have to know what it means to say La ilaha illallah. Because La ilaha illallah is not just ikrar bil lisan. It's not just merely saying it with the tongue. You have to believe it is tasdeeq al-janan. You have to affirm it with your heart. In your heart, you have to believe that there is no God, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is his servant, his messenger. You have to believe it. You have to live your life as if there is no God but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the most important topic. If we were to say, to give you a technical sort of definition, or technological definition, istilahi definition as we would say, of what Tawheed actually is. It's a branch of knowledge from which we're able to understand the essence, the divine essence, the attributes and the actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's simply put. It's where we understand, it's a branch of knowledge that helps us understand or comprehend the divine essence, the attributes and the actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even then, we will never truly be able to fully comprehend or understand the essence of Allah. Never. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. There is nothing like it. Whatever you think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever we have in our limited minds or limited understanding, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like. Then know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is different. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. There is nothing like him. Because we can only compare somebody to somebody who we have seen. How many times do people come across me and say, oh, you remind me of this person. You remind me of that person. Nobody says, oh, you remind me of, my unborn child 20 years into the future. Nobody says that, do they? Because that person, at that moment in time, is non-existent. They haven't seen that individual. So you can only compare something to something that you already know. That's how limited we are as human beings. With Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, somebody we haven't seen, somebody we will not see. إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. If Allah gives us that ability in Jannah to see Him. You know, we have never seen Him, and we're not going to see Him in this dunya. Then we cannot compare Him to anything that is created. So that's why we must understand that concept. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran gives us one surah. Yeah? And it encompasses the entire goodness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that surah is Surah Ikhlas. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. Say that He is one, He is eternal and absolute. There is nothing like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He does not give birth, nor is He begotten, nor has He been given birth to. And there's nothing like it. Yeah? Simply to understand that one short surah and the importance of this surah. You know, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ إِنَّهَا لَتَعْدِلُ ثُلُثَ الْقُرْآنِ. That wallahi, that by Allah in whose hands my soul is, this surah is equivalent to 1/3 of the Quran. SubhanAllah. 1/3 of the Quran is encompassed in a surah of 3 verses. MashaAllah. May Allah give us the ability to truly understand and comprehend it. There was, you know, I was going to narrate a hadith in regards to that, and it's mentioned by Imam Bukhari in Kitab Tawheed, in his chapter of Sahih Bukhari. And it's narrated by Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha that there were a few companions who were sent on an expedition, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam sunnah was that he would appoint one person. I think he would appoint one person as the leader, as the imam, who would pray the salahs, who would lead the prayers while the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not there. So in this case, he appointed one leader, one imam, and that individual, he would pray a surah. You know, when he would lead the prayer, he would pray a surah, and then he would conclude it at the end with a rendition of Surah Ikhlas. He would finish. So for example, if he read Surah Al-Duha, yeah, in the first rak'ah, then he would finish that rak'ah. After Surah Al-Duha, he would read Surah Ikhlas. So at the end of every single rak'ah, no matter what surah he read, he would finish it, he would conclude with Surah Al-Ikhlas. And then they came back to, after that expedition, they came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And naturally after the expedition, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would ask them what took place, what happened during this time. And they would inform the Prophet ﷺ of everything that had taken place. And they said, Ya Rasulullah, there was one thing that we didn't quite understand, there was one thing that we didn't quite comprehend, that the imam that you had appointed, he would read the surahs in the first rak'ah and in the second rak'ah, but he would conclude both of them with a rendition of Surah Al-Ikhlas. And the Prophet ﷺ said, سَلُّوهُ لِأَيِّ شَيْءٍ يَسْنَعُ ذَلِكَ. That go and ask him why he used to do this. Go and ask him why he would do this. فَسَأَلُوهُ. And then they went and asked that individual. فَقَالَ. And then that individual said, لِأَنَّهَا صِفَةُ الرَّحْمَنِ. Because it is the description of the Rahman, of the merciful, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَأَنَا أُحِبُّ أَنْ أَقْرَأَ بِهَا. And I love to recite it. Simple reason. It's a description of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I love to recite it. فَقَالَ النَّبِيُّ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam then said, أَخْبِرُوهُ أَنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّهُ. Go and tell that individual that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves him. Because of his love for this surah. Yeah? Nobody told that individual. That's why it was weird for them. At the end of every rak'ah, regardless of what surah he had already read, regardless of how many ayat he had read, he would conclude with Surah Al-Ikhlas. Every single rak'ah. Yeah? And why? Because he loved it. He loved to recite it. It's a description of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he wants to always, in ibadah, that's the best place. That's the best time to describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he would do so. Yeah? he would do so. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam told the companions, أَخْبِرُوهُ أَنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّهُ, that go and inform him now that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves him because of his action. That was so beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is what that surah encompasses the oneness or the Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what is necessary for him. Now, in short, and to summarize, this field of knowledge refers to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala completely, and it helps us to identify three things. The first, what is necessary for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For example, is necessary for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to exist. Wajibul wujud, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has always been in existence and will continue to always be in existence. This is necessary for him. The second thing that we have to understand is what is permissible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is permissible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to create and to destroy. That is up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's discretion. He may create and He may destroy whatever He wants, whenever He wants to. That's permissible for Him. And the third thing that we must understand, or we must try to comprehend, is what is impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in short, those things that are impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are all the attributes of imperfection. So if something is imperfect for us within the dunya, and we're fani, we're temporal, we're temporary, our existence is temporary, we're hadith, we were, at one time we were in existence, and soon we will not be in existence, And if those attributes are imperfect for us, then how can they be perfect for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Naturally, those things are not perfect for Him. So for example, if somebody accuses you of lying, and he says you are a liar, even though you haven't ever lied before. For example, you've never lied, and he says, well, because you have the ability to tell a lie, you're a liar. And that's imperfect for us. We're not going to accept that argument. So we can never accept that on behalf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it's an imperfect quality. And everything that has any form of imperfection in it is imperfect for the divineness or the majesty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's those three things that we must understand. What's necessary for Him, what's permissible for Him, and what is impossible for Him. Those three things. And then comes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sifat, His attributes. And you've got some of His famous, well-known attributes. We see the 99 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describing His 99 attributes. There's many more than 99. You know what? We cannot, by us limiting the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that can be constituted as a form of shirk. We should not limit it. We should not limit the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're limitless. Allah Azza wa Jal is as we cannot comprehend Him. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ. He's much more than that. Whatever we think of Him, He's far different than that. That's the beauty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's existence. Al-Qidam. The Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pre-existent. Huwa al-awwal wal-akhir. He is the first and He is the last. Never was there a time when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was not in existence. And never will there be a time when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to be in existence. He always has and He always will be. Then you have Al-Baqa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ever living. Al-Fani. Which is the opposite of Al-Fani. We're temporal. Our existence is temporary. We're here for a short period of time, whether it be 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 100 years. If you're lucky, 120 years. Extremely lucky, you got a meter and 120. But our existence is temporary. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is baqa, He's ever living. Death, He's not subject to death or decay. Then you have al-mukhalafa lil-hawadith. And this is one attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I wanted to base my talk upon. Because it's impossible to encapsulate the Tawheed and Shirk, all these attributes of everything, into about 45 minutes of one talk. It's impossible to do that. So I wanted to focus on something specific. And this is one attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I wanted to focus on. Al-mukhalafa lil-hawadith. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is contrary to the created things. He's different to the created things. This is our question. For example, if we were to question, what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like? I gave you a simple answer to that question. He is different to whatever your mind imagines Him to be. Whatever you think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is different. He is far better than that. If we think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so merciful, for example, if I was to say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is 10 times more merciful than me. For example, if I was to say that, He's 10 times more merciful than me. You know? That's my limited understanding of what mercy is. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so merciful that we cannot even comprehend. Our narrow minds cannot even comprehend the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we cannot comprehend just one of His divine attributes, then how can we comprehend His essence, His divine essence? Never will be able to do that. That's the beauty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are some of the attributes that I wanted to mention. And the attributes that cannot be associated with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of them is in line with this. Al-Mukhalafa lil-Hawadith. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is contrary to created things. He's nothing like those things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. And we only know of created things. Yeah? We only know of created things. We look at this mosque, we know what a mosque looks like, we know what a green dome looks like. Why? Because we've seen one before. We've seen these things. We've experienced these things. We know what it feels like to come and pray in a masjid. Why? Because we've experienced that already. If there was something that we did not know, we had never seen, we had not heard of, we had never experienced, we have absolutely no knowledge of, then how can we give a conclusion based on it? How can we give an interpretation of that? We can never do that. So therefore, to give some sort of an interpretation of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like, or na'udhu billah, what He looks like, what His features are, that's beyond our comprehension. Man is not able to understand those things. That knowledge, that ta'weel, that specific interpretation is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And that is our belief. And that is the belief of the Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah. That is the belief of the overwhelming majority of the scholars of Islam, the overwhelming majority of the Sahaba-i-Kiram, the Salafus Salihin, the pious predecessors of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's what we need to believe. There's one fundamental belief. The fundamental belief is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He cannot mimic His creation or cannot resemble His creation in any way. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, يَدُ اللَّهِ فَوْقَ أَيْدِيهِمْ, that the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above their hands. Yeah? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran talks about wajhullah, the face of Allah, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Ar-Rahmanu ala al-arshi istawa, that the Rahman is placed upon the throne, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these kind of verses, do we interpret them literally or figuratively? And if so, which one do we do? Or do we have to draw a fine line in between? Literally, we cannot interpret those verses. Because if we were to interpret those verses literally and say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has hands, He has a face, yeah? And try to give imperfect attributes of ours and apply them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's called anthropomorphism, and it's not allowed. It's not acceptable. So there are three opinions in regards to this, and I'm going to give you all three opinions. Yeah? And then I'm going to leave it to you to decide which of those opinions is the best opinion. I'm going to first give you the minority opinion. And this opinion exists within the scholars of Islam. The first opinion is that those individuals who have sufficient amount of knowledge are able to comprehend, understand those verses and interpret them in the correct way. Yeah? So therefore, they will say that in regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hand, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says Yadullah, it signifies the might and power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the Wajhullah, the face of Allah, it signifies the beauty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Istawa, seated upon the throne, it means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taking ownership over the throne. So they will interpret those verses figuratively and try to create an understanding that is acceptable for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, this is the minority opinion. This is the minority opinion. The majority opinion is the jamhur. Yeah? The vast majority of the scholars say, our job, our opinion should be, and this is according to the Sahaba and the Salaf al-Salihin, that these verses can truly and only be interpreted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, and it is our job to believe in them. Like a person approached Sayyidina Imam Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and he said to Sayyidina Imam Malik rahimahullah, he said to him that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that Ar-Rahman al-Arsh istawa, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Rahman, is seated or is placed upon the throne, is balanced upon the throne, how would you interpret that verse? He asked the meaning of istawa, and Imam Malik says something which has reverberated throughout the centuries. Yeah? He said 1-2 sentences, and the ulama are teaching their students the answer of Imam Malik in classes today. I remember learning this when I was 16 years old. Al-istawa ghayr majhool. That the istawa, the sitting, is ghayr majhool. It is not known. Wal-kayf ghayr mahkool. And the how is incomprehensible. We cannot understand. We do not know how. It's not in our comprehension to understand such a verse. Wal iman bihi wajib. And iman in it, faith in it, is wajib. It's compulsory for us to believe in that. Why? Because they are the verses of the Quran. وَالسَّوَالِ عَنْهُ بِدْعَةٌ. And asking about it is a bid'ah, is an innovation. وَمَا أَرَاكَ إِلَّا مُبْتَدِعًا. And I do not see anything in you except innovation. I see you as an innovator. And then he ordered him to be thrown out of his class. So this is how the ulama, the likes of Sayyidina Imam Malik, who was the Imam of Medina, what did he say? He said, we should not delve into these verses. We should not indulge, our fantasies, shall we say. And majority of the time is the individuals who do not know the fara'id of istinja, who do not know the fara'id of wudu, and they will go around saying, how do we interpret these verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of his anthropomorphism? Is anthropomorphism in Islam, is it permissible? Ask them about the fara'id. This is not ma'lumun min ad-deen bil-darura. This is not from the dururiyat of deen that we need to know. Yeah? Not only do we not need to know them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered us to stay away from them. Because why? The ta'weel of these specific verses is only with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our job is just to believe in them. And that's the majority opinion. However, there is a third opinion of those who deviated from the majority consensus and the minority opinion by ascribing attributes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by saying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a face, he has a hand, and so forth, giving him human attributes. And that is incorrect. And there's many scholars who have done so, who have done that, and they have been refuted. So one of the first was Shaykh ibn Taymiyyah, who is well known for his alleged anthropomorphism. He even spent time in Cairo in prison. He died in 728 Hijri. These kind of verses are something that we have to refrain from. Leave it to the scholars. Our job is not to do that. The layman, me and you, we don't need to know where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. We don't need to know what qualities he has in terms of his features. We don't need to know these kind of things. Not only do we not need to know them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us, stay away from them. They're not going to benefit you. I'll give you one answer of Ibn Ata'illah al-Isqadri, rahimahullah, may Allah be pleased with him. Ibn Ata'illah, one of the greatest scholars that Islam has ever produced. Now this individual, he gives a beautiful answer. He says, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will not ask you about the details of his nature or his divine attributes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to ask you, what did you believe about me? Did you believe that I had facial features or not? Or did I have a hand or not? We seek protection in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from this. He's not going to ask us those things. Rather, Ibn Ata'illah says, he's going to ask you about those things that you did when you tarried on the earth. He's going to ask you what you did in your time that you spent in the dunya. So seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala where He is seeking you. This was the answer of Ibn Ata'illah. If only we could truly comprehend that or understand that. We forget about our dhururiyat. We do not pray our salah. We do not know how to perform wudu. We do not know the faraid of istinja. And yet this is something that we wish to delve into. No. Stay away from such matters until you have firm knowledge of them. And firm knowledge will only come when you fulfill your dhururiyat. Yeah? When you act upon everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed for you. And we have to we have to take heed. I'll mention to you something of Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He says that the shaitan will come to you and he will constantly ask you, who created this? Who created that? Who created this? Who created that? Until eventually he will ask you, who created Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And he goes, at that point, before that point, you should seek protection in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and refrain. You should say, A'udhu billah. A'udhu billah. I seek protection in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because that's what the devil is. That's the devil's deception. That's the shaitan's deception. That we constantly fall into that trap. Who done this? Who done that? Excessive questioning. That's what destroyed the Bani Israel. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered them, go and sacrifice the cow. Tell us about the cow. What color should the cow be? What size should the cow be? Tell us all the attributes of the cow. Where are we going to find the cow? They made it difficult for themselves by excessively questioning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And kathratu sawal, excessive questioning, is something that was forbidden, made forbidden by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That this is something that destroys nations. It destroys the Bani Israel. The Prophet ﷺ did not want that to happen to his ummah. So let's refrain from this excessive questioning in regards to our deen. And I'm going to leave the aspect of Tawheed there, even though I had so many things to talk about. I'm trying to breeze through them so as you don't get too tired, and I see some people slowly starting to nod off. So I'll come to the crux of the reason why we're here today, the crux of the talk. The attributes of what the definition of shirk. What is shirk? Shirk is to associate or to partner. Yeah? It is to associate somebody or something in Allah's nature or His attributes. Azza wa Jalla. It is the greatest of all crime. There is no doubt about that. Murder, rape, pillage, everything else is left behind. Someone who commits shirk has committed the worst of crimes. To associate a partner with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is no greater crime than that. And this fact in itself is sufficient to warn us of its magnitude, to refrain from such a thing. Yeah? So, in regards to his definition, Allama Qurtubi in his Jami' al-Karam, in his tafsir, he writes that there are 3 different stages or 3 different forms, shall we say, of shirk. He said the first is the major form of shirk. And the major form of shirk is to consider a being other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala worthy of worship. That's the major form of shirk. The second is to consider that another being other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can perform or create, do certain actions independently, even if you do not believe that that individual is a God. So if you believe that a person can create, give life to humans, for example, or give life to something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created, if you believe that, even if you don't believe that that individual is a God, that's still a form of shirk. The third is, and something that nobody mentions, and I can't comprehend to this day, but all the talks that I have heard in regards to what shirk is, nobody mentions this. It's called shirk in ibadah, shirk in worship, and that's riyah, showing off. Showing off in worship is a form of shirk. And yet, not many of us know those things, and that's something that we do. For example, shall I give you an example of that? And a person comes to the masjid to pray. He comes to the masjid to pray, and for example, he might not have wudu. Yeah? He's come because Abu is standing in the front. Yeah? He's thinking, now I'm gonna, Dad told me to come, otherwise he's not gonna let me in the house tonight. Yeah? So I'm going to the masjid. So he comes to the masjid. He doesn't have wudu, and he comes. He's not dressed appropriately. He's not done his rituals properly. His ablution properly, and he comes to the masjid and he wants to stand and get as close to his father, just so his father can see him. Cough a few times so his father can hear if he's a few rows back. Make sure his father has seen him. And once his father has seen him, he's seen him. Now I can go. I can chip. I can do what I say. And that salah that he reads, he reads with the jama'ah. Yeah, he reads. That's shirk in worship. That's riyah. That's showing off. If another person comes to the masjid and he continues to pray nawafil prayer, and then he sees somebody coming in as he was about to finish, and he starts another 2 rakats. Look at me, mashallah. So people look at me and say, mashallah, subhanallah. What an individual. Jab dekhen nafal hi padta rehta hai yaar. Whenever we see him, all he's doing is reading nafal. What a beautiful person. What a pious individual. That's shirk in ibadah. And that's called shirk khafi, the hidden shirk. Something that we do not know of. Riyah, showing off. And we should refrain from that, stamp that out. And that can only come by making yourself, and that can only come by understanding what ibadah is. Ibadah means utmost humility and humbleness. That's the definition of ibadah translated into English. Utmost humility and humbleness. That's why, when people say something is shirk, in ibadah, when we stand up and we fold our hands after the takbir tahrima, we do ibadah while we do our qiyam. We go into ruku, that's a form of ibadah. We go into sajda, that's a form of ibadah. So that's a form of ibadah, right? Now, if I was to stand in front of my father came into the room and I stood up and I folded my hands, for example, and I looked down. Is that ibadah? No. Why? It's the same action. My father came into the room, I folded my hands, I stood up and I looked down. I may have even, unintentionally, I may have been facing the Qibla as well. Is it ibadah? No. But if I did the same action in my salah, is it ibadah? Yes. But what's the difference between the two? Intention, niyyah. My niyyah there, when I was doing ibadah, was utmost humility and humbleness, and I'm doing this for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I had my intention in advance. When I stood up for my father, what was my intention? To give him respect. The respect that my father deserves. So we have to understand that ibadah is something that is based upon our intention. Niyatul mu'mini khayrun min amalihi. That the niyyah of a mu'min, the niyyah of a believer is better than his action. It precedes his action, in fact. And that's everything. Whenever we intend something, that's only what we're going to get. For example, if we fasted, we have Ramadan coming up soon, so this is an important question. Masala of fiqh as well. If we got up late, we didn't eat anything, we got up late, we didn't pray Fajr, we didn't have Sahri, we didn't make the intention, we didn't even have it in our minds, or we didn't have it in our minds that we're going to be fasting, and we did not eat anything from, say we got up at 5 o'clock, and iftari was at 7. We got up at 5 p.m., which is a joke in itself, nobody should do that. 5 p.m., iftari is at 7 p.m., and we had iftari. Is our fast complete? Without the intention? We had no intention of fasting, but we did not eat anything from sunrise to sunset. We fulfilled the conditions of the fast. Is our fast complete? No. We have to have the intention to be fasted, even if we didn't say the intention out loud. Even if we didn't say the intention, because the intention is an action of the heart.
We have to have the intention within our hearts. If on the other hand we had the intention, and we ate something during our fast, is our fast broken? Unintentionally? No, it's not. If unintentionally we had something to eat and we didn't know that, we realized that we're fasting, is still our fasting remains because the intention was always there. So intention in worship is of paramount importance. So therefore, when it comes to shirk, and labeling people as shirk, as Muslim, this is something that we have to stamp out completely. As whenever I would, they would talk about racism in football, and it's called stamp out. Let's stamp out racism in football. Let's stamp this out. To completely to get rid of it. Let's stamp out this culture that we have of abusing one another, and calling each other, mushrik and kafir and so forth. This is not from the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Contrary to what some of you may believe, this is not from the sunnah of the Salaf al-Salihin, the Sahaba al-Karam. This is not from the practice of the pious Salihin, the pious scholars from the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam up until now. This is not from their practice to call each other mushrik and to call each other kafir. Sayyidina Imam Malik, again the Imam of Medina, may Allah be pleased with him, he says something quite profound and something quite beautiful, that if I have 99 reasons to believe in the kufr of somebody, 99 reasons to believe that someone is a kafir, and I have only one small reason to believe that he's a Muslim, he's a mu'min, I will choose the latter. I will believe that he's a mu'min. Even if I have 99 reasons on one side to believe that this person is a kafir, I will take that one reason and I will grasp onto it. وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Grab hold, stand firm onto the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا, and do not separate, do not be divided. I will take that one. For us, shall I tell you the difference today? If we had 99 reasons to believe that someone is a Muslim, and we had one reason to believe that he is a kafir, we're going to call him a kafir. Na'udhu. And that's the reality. That's the sad state of affairs. 99 reasons we may have that this individual is a Muslim, he is a mu'min. Just one reason to believe in the kufr of somebody, we're going to say he's a kafir. And we're going to believe it. And you know what? It's the laymen who do that. It's not the scholars. The scholars, can debate. The scholars can discuss amicably, respectfully with one another. It's the laymen who are calling each other kafir. It's the Joe Blogs on the street, the Zayd Bakr on the street, who is saying, this person is a kafir, this person is a mushrik, this person is committed shirk. And the Prophet ﷺ, there's a hadith mentioned by Ibn Habban, he's narrated it in his Sahih. Imam Bukhari has also mentioned it in Tariq Kabir, that the Prophet ﷺ has warned us about a time, that there will be a time when a man, he will continue to pray and continue to pray and continue to pray and do ibadah until his face will become enlightened. But then he will continue to develop pride and something will happen to him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take that away from him. And what will he do? The very first thing he will do when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes his mercy away from him, that person will pick up his sword. He will pick up his sword and he will fight with his neighbor because he accuses him of shirk. That's what he will do. He will fight with his neighbor with the sword and accuse him of being a mushrik. Have we not come into that time? That this is happening today. This is happening today. There's a hadith narrated by the Imam of Hadith, Imam Ibn Asakir, in Tibyan al-Kalb. He says something quite beautiful. that a man said to Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, he came to him and he complained to Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar, and he said that I have a neighbor, and again, the time was existed in the time of the Sahaba Ikram, I have a neighbor who accuses me of shirk, and he wishes to bear testimony to that I am a mushrik. And Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar, instead of saying to him, giving him the wrong advice, and saying, go and accuse him of shirk, reciprocating in the same manner. No, this was the Sahabi of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What does Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar say? He says, Kul la ilaha illallah. Say la ilaha illallah. And once you have said it, he is a liar. SubhanAllah. Say la ilaha illallah. Once you have said la ilaha illallah, that individual becomes a liar. But this is how we must approach these matters, with utmost dignity, utmost respect for one another. Even if we differ, we're going to have differences. The Sahaba-i-Kiram had differences, but the difference between us, our differences, and the differences of the Sahaba-i-Kiram is that they had love for one another. They loved each other for the sake of Allah. The Prophet ﷺ sent a group of his companions to Bani Qurayza. And they went to Bani Qurayza, and the Prophet ﷺ says, when you get to Bani Qurayza, you pray your asr there. So pray asr when you get to Bani Qurayza. And on the journey, while they were going, the time of Maghrib began to dawn upon them. And a group of the Sahaba said that we're going to pray our asr in the journey, because the time of asr is going to go. Because if the Prophet ﷺ has ordered us to pray our asr, and we're going to pray within its time, because the Quran says, "Inna salata kanat ala al-mu'minina kitaban mawquta." That salah has been prescribed to you at specific times, so we're going to pray within our time. So they prayed it there. The other group said, no, we're going to let the time of Maghrib come. We're going to pray Maghrib, and then when we reach Bani Qurayza, we're going to pray our asr there. Because we're going to obey the letter of the law. The law was the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We're going to obey his command. He said, pray asr in Bani Qurayza. We're going to pray asr there even if it comes after Maghrib. And when both of these two groups, such differing situations, right? Such contradictory sentiments and issues, right? Completely the opposite. But they approached it in a dignified manner. They disagreed, but they respectfully disagreed. And when they came back to the Prophet ﷺ, he did not reprimand either of them. He praised both of them for their actions. Subhanallah. So even they had differences and disputes. But look at the love that they had for one another. I'll give you the example of two people that we just spoke about. Shaykh ibn Ata'illah al-Iskandari rahimahullah. Shaykh ibn Taymiyyah, who existed in the same time as Ibn Ata'illah. They existed at a time in Cairo. They existed in one place at one time. It is reported that they met each other once as well, in the masjid of Al-Azhari. They met and they disagreed, they had differences with one another, but they approached them in a dignified manner. Never will you hear or read in Ibn Ata'illah's book or any of his works that he refers to Ibn Taymiyyah in a derogatory manner. Never will you read or hear about Ibn Taymiyyah talking about Ibn Ata'illah in a derogatory manner. Why? Because they disagreed in respectfully. They had respect for one another. And where is that respect today? Nowadays, we have a disagreement with somebody. We hear that somebody has said something without even verifying what that person has said. We will automatically call him a kafir or a Muslim. We will make that statement first and we will ask questions later. إن جاءكم فاسق بنبأ فتبينوا. When a fasiq comes to you with a khabar, فتبينوا. Then do your tabyin, do your research. Go and ask that person. Verify whether that khabar is true, whether that information is true or not. So this is something which is of paramount importance. And we have to make sure that we do not abuse each other. Imam al-Shafi in Kitab al-Umm, in his book, al-Umm, he says that the issues of iftar and ijtihad, the issues that the ulama should deal with, they should never result in either one of them raising their hand towards the other or raising their voice towards the other. They should never abuse one another or refer to each other in a derogatory manner. Never. We should always have respect for one another. The Prophet ﷺ, he was abused. The Prophet ﷺ was vilified. The Prophet ﷺ was beaten. And the Prophet ﷺ never raised his hand. And I said that Anas ibn Malik radiallahu ta'ala, I'm going to end with talking about the Prophet ﷺ, but because there is nothing that we will benefit more by talking about the Prophet ﷺ. There's nothing more that we can benefit with anything else. You know? The Prophet ﷺ said that Anas ibn Malik says that I spent 8 years or 10 years in the company of the Prophet ﷺ, and he never raised his hand towards me, even when he was upset with me. Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha says that the Prophet ﷺ never raised his hand towards a woman or a child. The Prophet, you know, the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, they would say that the Prophet ﷺ would never shout, never swear at them. Huh? How the Prophet ﷺ expresses displeasure towards his wives, or expresses his sort of emotions in terms of anger towards his wife. The Prophet ﷺ would go quiet and he would walk away. Look at the beautiful character of the Prophet ﷺ. If only we could apply that within our own lives. That we get angry with someone deliberately riles us up, and we go quiet and we walk away. SubhanAllah. Look what a change would come about our communities if we apply these sunnahs of the Prophet ﷺ. So it's of paramount importance. There's a hadith that I wanted to mention to you in regards to shirk, and this is something which is extremely important. And I have a few minutes left, inshallah. So I'm just going to take 5 minutes of your time. The hadith, I'm going to narrate it first in Arabic. I'm going to read it to you, and then I'm going to translate the hadith. And then you can make your mind up, your own mind up yourself. It's narrated by Sayyidina Uqba ibn Amr radiallahu ta'ala anhuma. He says, أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم خرج يوما فصلى على أهل أحد صلاته على الميت. That the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, he went out one day and he prayed upon the martyrs of Uhud. So he prayed the funeral of the martyrs of Uhud. ثم انصرف إلى المنبر فقال, and then he went up on the pulpit فقال, and he said, إني فرط لكم وأنا شهيد عليكم. That إني فرط لكم, that I will pave the path for you, to pave the way for you. وأنا شهيد عليكم, and I am a witness over you. والله لأنظر إلى هود الآن, that by Allah, right now I am looking at the Hawd, the fountain of Kawthar. And he does not refer to it as the Hawd of Kawthar or the fountain of Kawthar. He refers to it as Hawdi, my Hawd. I'm looking at my fountain right now. And he says, وَإِنِّي أَعْتَيْتُ مَفَاتِيهَ خَزَائِنِ الْأَرْضِ أو مفاتيح الأرض. That, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me, and I've been given, مفاتيح خزائن الأرض. I've been given the treasures of the earth, or the keys to the earth. وَإِنِّي, and this is the most important part, وَإِنِّي وَاللَّهِ مَا أَخَافُ عَلَيْكُمْ أَن تُشْرِكُوا بَعْدِي وَلَكِنْ أَخَافُ عَلَيْكُمْ أَن تَنَافَسُوا فِيهَا. أو كما قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. I have, by Allah, وَإِنِّي, I, وَاللَّهِ, by Allah, لَا أَخَافُ, or مَا أَخَافُ عَلَيْكُمْ, I have no fear, أَن تُشْرِكُوا بَعْدِي, that you will commit shirk after me. I have no fear of that. وَلَكِنْ أَخَافُ عَلَيْكُمْ أَن تَنَافَسُوا فِيهَا, but I fear that you will quarrel with one another, you will fight with one another for what? The dunya. The materialistic form of this dunya. That's what I worry about. And that's what the Prophet ﷺ worried about. If the Prophet ﷺ is not worrying about this, and he's worrying about this, fighting with one another for the materialistic form of the dunya, that should be our main concern. Dunya, and to stamp out our feelings that this is everything. That this life is everything for us. And that's what we believe. We spend this life and our time on the earth as if this is it. There's nothing more. You know, like those people who do not believe in Allah and the Prophet ﷺ, those non-Muslims, for them is, you know, drugs, drink and rock and roll. You know, this is what it is. This is the life. Enjoy it while you have it. We are Muslims. We believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We believe in Jannah and Jahannam. We believe in Yawm al-Qiyamah, the last day. How can we then, you know, fight with one another for the materialistic form of the dunya and say this is it, dunya, let's enjoy ourselves, let's enjoy life when we have it. Those comments are not, you know, they're not correct coming out of the mouth of a Muslim. So we should make sure that we do not do that. And before we end, I was informed by one of the brothers that we have a form where you can write down your name, your mobile email address, so the masjid can keep that for future purposes. Whenever they arrange any events, they can call you. And they've got event feedback here as well, so you can tell them what you thought about the event. You haven't fallen asleep, so for me that's enough. You know, you stayed awake. It's a difficult topic. You know, it's not one of those things that, you know, which we can rile up your emotions and get you saying Nare Takbir and Nare Risalat, which we should do. So let me start by saying Nare Takbir, Nare Risalat. You know, this is something. When we talk about these topics, it's important for us to learn something. One of my teachers, one of my shuyukh, he would say to me, he said, Rizwan, you know, if just one person leaves the gathering with a changed heart, if one person leaves the gathering inspired, know that your job is done. Know that your job is done. If 99 people, you have 100 people in the gathering and 99 of them had absolutely no idea what you're talking about and they do not want to see you again, and just one person learns something from your talk, he learns something from you, know that your job is done. And I do hope that, you know, there isn't only just one person, that there's a lot of you who have gained something from this talk today. It's a difficult concept for us to comprehend. But may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to understand it. And inshallah, in future talks, we can talk about the Mi'raj of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is something which is of paramount importance because we're coming to that time. Preparation for the month of Ramadan. The month of Ramadan is dawning upon us. You know, the Sahaba Al-Karam, 6 months prior to the month of Ramadan, they would beg Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They would cry to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say, Ya Allah, Ya Rabb, oh Allah, give us life that we may be able to experience the month of Ramadan. Just one time. Give us life that we may be able to experience the mercy, the bounty of the month of Ramadan. And during the month, they would not waste a single second. They will spend the entire month in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's ibadah, as if these were their last moments of Ramadan. That's how they would spend it. And once Ramadan had finished, for the next 5 to 6 months later, half a year later, they would cry and beg Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept all those du'as and the prayers that they made in the mosque. So their entire year revolved around this one month. And for us, when the month of Ramadan comes, what happens? Head in our hands. What are we going to do? I got a school run. I got to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning. You know, it's going to be so hot, 30 degrees, 25 degrees, 20 degrees, whatever the temperature is going to be. The fasts are going to be so long. How am I going to do it? I have no time between iftari and sahri. You know, I need to go to the gym. During the day, I can't do that anymore. You know, when I need to find a 24-hour gym. You got Pure Gym down there, by the way. That's 24 hours. I've checked it out myself. So these are the issues that we worry about when the month of Ramadan comes. And you know what? We spend our entire Ramadan thinking about these issues. What are we going to eat? You know what? Our entire fast is based upon what we're going to eat. What am I going to have for Sahri? Ask your mum and your wife and whoever's going to cook for you. What am I going to have for Iftari? Make sure you make something nice. It's based around food. This is not the purpose of Ramadan. This was not what the Prophet ﷺ envisioned for this month. That is based around our food. Food is just one aspect of it. Just one small aspect of Ramadan is not eating. There's so much more to it. The mercy that descends within this month, we have to take benefit from it. Beg Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ask, you know what? If we can learn to be merciful towards one another in this month, then know that you've achieved something great. If we can learn to love one another for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this month, then know that your job is done. لا يؤمن Sayyidina Anas ibn Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhu reports a hadith which is reported by Imam Muslim in the Sahih. Says, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. None of you can truly believe until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. So if you want to have a nice doner kebab for iftari, don't wish that your brother or somebody else has equal or better food than you do. It doesn't necessarily have to be a doner kebab, but you wish that for your brothers. You wish that whatever you're going to eat, that somebody eats better than you. Whatever you're going to have, whatever you have in terms of clothes, hope and pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives your brother something better than that. Nowadays, somebody's got a 3-bedroom house, we want a 5-bedroom house. Somebody's got a 5,000 pound car, we want a 10,000 pound car. Just to outdo them, just to outdo somebody else. I went to one of my cousin's houses the other day. I'll just tell you the story to give you a little bit of entertainment at least. And I went to his house and he was saying to me, mashallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed him with a lot of money. And he had about 10 to 15 cars parked outside in his driveway. And he says, whatever car these cars come and go, and I have one car for myself which I keep for a year, and then I sell it after a year, then I buy a new one a year later. I was just listening to him saying, mashallah, Allah bless you and give you more, and he says, the problem is there a problem? Go ahead, tell me what the problem is. So the problem is, I buy this car, and straight away the guy who lives opposite me, he's Pakistani as well. That's what he said to me. He's a Pakistani as well. And he looks and he sees my car and he buys the same car as me. And then he says to me, in Apni Patwari, he says, Mari show khatam ho jayegi. He said, I have no show left. Because he buys exactly the same car as me. And this is not long ago. And I thought to myself, what's wrong with that? MashaAllah, that's good for him. Be happy for him. Be happy for him that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him the ability to do the same as you. He's your Muslim brother. Wish for him what you wish for yourself. But that's not something that we want to hear. We want the best. We want khair. When we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we say, Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana. This is our dua. How many of you know this dua? Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana. Wa fil akhirati hasana. Wa qina adhab an-nar. Everybody knows this dua. Raise your hands if you know this dua. Almost everybody. Almost everybody. For those of you that don't, learn it. Approach your aim, ask your scholars, ask somebody who knows about it. Because this is where your true wealth is. And what does it mean? How many of you know the translation to this dua? A select few. May Allah bless you. For those of you that don't, see? For our whole lives we knew this dua since we were little kids. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. And we don't know what it means. We're praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we don't know what it means. It means رَبَّنَا, oh our Lord, not my Lord, our Lord. آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً. Give us the best in this world. آتنا في الدنيا حسنة. Give us the best in this world. وفي الآخرة حسنة. And give us the best in the akhirah, in the hereafter. وقنا عذاب النار. And save us from the torment or the punishment of the nar, of the hellfire. This is the translation to that dua. Make sure now each and every one of you knows. How many of you know the translation to that dua? Raise your hands. You know the translation for that dua. So now you know what you're praying. So you're constantly praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala within your salah 5 times a day. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً. Give us the best in this world. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers your prayer by giving your brother something, you complain, say, why has he got it? You're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give it to him. You're not asking for yourself only. You're asking for everybody. آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً. Give us the best in this world and give us the best in the akhirah. Because we are one ummah. And one ummah is like one body. The Prophet ﷺ said, if one part of that body is suffering, then the entire body feels that pain. You know? If a thorn pricks you in your toe, you feel the pain in your head. If you have a burn, you burn your little pinky, you burn your little finger. Eh? What do you think, Imam Sahib? Junior Imam Sahib. You burn your little finger, Allah never give you such a pain. You burn it, your whole entire body feels pain. I broke my tibia in my right ankle many years ago. And when I broke it, by Allah, I say, Wallahi, I thought that I had broken my entire body. I felt the pain. When it happened, I felt the pain in my arms, my hands, and it was just a fracture in my tibia. And I felt the pain throughout my body. I was having headaches through the pain. This should be our concern for the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. If one person is suffering, if your neighbor is unable to sleep at night because he's worried and depressed, wallahi, we should be able to sleep at night, worrying about him. Because that's the Prophet ﷺ. He would spend sleepless nights, begging, crying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for who? For himself? No, for us, for you and me. And what do we give him in return? We fight with one another. We quarrel with one another. We argue with one another. And this is not the purpose of the Prophet ﷺ. This is not the purpose of the Prophet ﷺ's mercy. This is not the purpose of why we are here. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I've taken up too much of your time already. I do beg for forgiveness. I tried to take this time and the time that I missed before as well. So I took an extra 15-20 minutes. I hope that you have learned something from this. I have a deep connection with this city. I really do. I only spent 2.5 months here. But the love that I received from this city and the potential by Allah that I have seen in this city, I have not seen anywhere else. Because you have something here. I have delivered talks all over the country, but there is something here. Yes, you have problems within your masajid. There's no doubt about it. But there is a potential within this city to come together. Because no matter how many problems you have, you may differ with certain people in regards to your theological views and viewpoints. You may differ, but differ respectfully. There's an opportunity for you here to differ, but differ respectfully. Have the same sort of respect for one another. Come together in jama'ah, in congregation. Pray for one another. And you have that opportunity to do it here, in all your masajid. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you the strength, give us all the strength and the ability to act truly upon the teachings, the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May He give us the ability to come together as a jama'ah, to pray together, to pray for one another. May He give us the understanding of the Quran, the little that we may learn from it, and the sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. I thank you once again, Qibla Imam Sahib and the brothers, Brother Saqib, Brother Tawheed, the management committee at the masjid who invited me for this beautiful event. Don't think that your mosque needs to be full in order for your event to be beautiful. No. The event needs to be beautiful by the people who are there and what they take away from it. So if you felt that you've taken something away from it, alhamdulillah, we have had a successful gathering. Even if there was one person sitting here. Even if there was one person and he went away feeling blessed. He went away thinking, subhanallah, I'm going to do more. I'm going to do more for my deen. You know, if he felt inspired by you, then alhamdulillah, we've had a successful event. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give me and you tawfiq to act upon the teaching of the Quran, the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, wa akhiru da'wana, alhamdulillah.